A very good afternoon to respected Director Sir Labasna, respected faculty members, and my dear officer trainees. I am Jayant Nahata, an officer trainee of the Indian Administrative Service. Today, that is 16th of December, marks a very important historic milestone as we commemorate 50 years of the Bangladesh Liberation War. 50 years ago on this date, assisted by the Indian Armed Forces, the brave people of Bangladesh won a decisive war for freedom against the Pakistani forces and carved for themselves a new nation. Thus, I'm honored to be introducing a very special guest, Shri B.K. Sinha, who was in action during the 1971 war, having bravely served in the Indian Army as lieutenant at the young age of 19. He also suffered injuries in the Battle of Khulna. Shri Sinha shortly thereafter joined the civil services as an IAS officer of the 1975 batch. In his long and illustrious career in civil services, he has served in various departments, including industries, labor, employment, tourism, land revenue, home, finance, revenue, and among many others. He has held the post of Managing Director of GMDC, Tourism Corporation, and Ahmedabad Municipal Commissioner as well. Sir, it's an absolute honor to have you here, and I humbly request you to please share your wisdom and real-life war experiences with us all. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to see my old friend Srinivas there and all you young friends. I've just returned from Hyderabad where we had the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Ceremony, for which my battalion, the 26th Battalion of the Madras Regiment, got battle honors after very heavy fighting. Coming back to the Bangladesh war, at that time it was East Pakistan. I'll just give a brief preview of what happened. At that time, as you know, East and West Pakistan was separated by thousands of miles. So they had a general election, and Mr. Mujibur Rahman of the Awami League of the East Pakistan, he had more seats in parliament than the other side. But the elite in West Pakistan, mainly the Punjabi elite, refused to accept him. So on some trumped up treason charges, he was arrested. So democracy was subverted right there. And then, unfortunately, as was learned later, the Pakistani armies sent a gentleman called General Tikka Khan to eliminate the complete intelligentsia of East Pakistan. This we learned later. When we entered the big cities, we found everybody, right from deputy commissioners, police superintendents, industrialists, businessmen, professors, they were all wiped out with their families. So the West Pakistanis had decided that we're going to finish them, the worst form of genocide, and they will be our slaves for eternity. What happened that the average villager or common man also was pushed to the brink by their army, and they ran to India, the last succor. So we had 10 million refugees on our borders in Bengal and Assam. Mrs. Indira Gandhi, our prime minister, had a very tough task. So she went around the whole world. She was not very well received in the United States. We had a gentleman called Richard Nixon, who later was found to be a crook and about to be impeached, but at that time he was totally against us. The only true friend at that time we had was the Soviet Union, led by the President Leonid Brezhnev. And as things would show later, when it came to the crunch, there were about 105-6 countries against India and 5-6 for India only, but with the Russian veto. So went around, and then with all these refugees coming, it was difficult to feed them, and there was a huge pressure on our economy. Pakistan, West Pakistan was in a mess, ruled by an army general called Yahya Khan, who used to love his Black Dog whiskey, and that was about it. Had no clue of administration. And so the army was the army. I guess it's the same there now, 50 years later, maybe with slight differences. This is the backdrop. Then what happened with all these refugees coming, India decided that it must do something. We didn't want to block our borders because, in a humanitarian way, people who are suffering, we've always given succor to them throughout centuries. So it so happened that my battalion, 26 Madras, which was in Jammu and Kashmir, was shifted to Calcutta. Calcutta was having Naxalite problems, so we were patrolling the streets. The police had run away at that time, or they were very scared. So we used to be patrolling Calcutta and other cities to keep the law and order intact. And after that, we went a little inside. I remember the places, Rana Ghat, etc., close to the border, that should a war come, then we should be ready. So we were under training. And very soon, I remember in November, we informally used to go inside and for patrols to see what the Pakistanis were up to, because we used to get Radio Pakistan very clearly. And I remember the phrases they would use. Concocted battles, they would say, "Humne Bharatiya forces ko tahs nahs kar diya," and there was no battle. Then ultimately, sometime in November, we did go inside informally. We had a couple of battles. There were different battalions, so I won't go into that. We were part of the 350 Brigade, comprising of 1st Jammu and Kashmir Rifles, 4th Sikh Regiment, and 26 Madras, which was ours. Very soon, through concerted action, the Pakistanis ran from Jessore, which was a major cantonment, and the only place they could go towards was Khulna. Then there was a sea. So Bangladesh war was in 3 parts. One was Chittagong hill tracts, one was the Dhaka side, and one was this Jessore-Khulna axis. So at that time, the Pakistani Air Force would come when we were very close to the border, and the Indian Air Force was nowhere to be found. So, they were used to do tricks or acrobatics like it's an air show. And our Jawans were asking, "Sahab, hamara Air Force kya kar raha hai?" So we had no answer really those days. And they would come and do strafing. And while we were on patrol, we also had to be careful. Some villagers I found with huge bullets, which fired from the aircraft, hitting them. And, then they used to get treatment. So we were all a little disappointed, to be very frank, at that time. Then suddenly I remember it was 21st or 22nd of November, 71. These Pakis were coming and doing all their acrobatic shows to show off. 3 Nats, GNATS, they used to be those fighter aircraft of the Indian Air Force. They landed from somewhere. And within about 5 to 15 minutes, the Pakistani 3-4 planes, we found parachutes coming down. All the planes of Pakistan which were in the air at that time were shot. And the pilots bailed out. They were captured by our people. And very soon we were able to, I think, bomb Jessore airport also. So the Air Force of Pakistan in East Pakistan was finished. So when we captured it, in any case, we had the advantage of having air power, which they didn't. On the Dhaka side, of course, they still had the Air Force. So we went to Jessore. On the way, we met dazed men and women slowly coming out of the villages, looking at us, with gay, the women had been raped, and, all sorts of atrocities had been committed on these hapless people. So they used to come and they physically touch us, as if. So we were wondering what is happening. Then somebody said, "Sir, aapka jo olive green uniform hai, this is the color of Islam also." So they're very scared of the khaki uniform. But seeing you all, in a way, it's like Allah has heard their prayers and sent people to save them. It was very, very touching, really. I remember going to Jessore jail, and all the jailers and all were wearing brand new uniforms, brand new belt, except if you looked at their faces, it was all red, as if. So we asked them, "What is wrong with all of you? Are you all sick?" He said, "Saab, parson tak to hum khud jail mein the 9 mahine se." So they were themselves in jail under the Pakistani authorities. And then they came out. They were, took over their old positions. I remember there used to be, there's a word called Razakar those days. Razakars were those people who were on the side of the Pakistani army. They were not Bengalis, there were others, but they were all Muslims, of course, but they were on the side of the Pakistani army as informers and first line of defense, before the Pakistani army got into action. So they were registered with their photographs. So suddenly, on the outskirts of Jessore, when we were there, we used to hear Raat ko phat, 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 phat. So we got worried, who the hell is this firing at midnight? Then we were told, look, they've got the registers of Razakars, instant justice. The Bengalis want to give to those fellows who were collaborators. So let's not get, Indian army should not get involved in all these things. That our mission is different, to liberate the country. That is their issue, let them sort it out. So such things happened. And then I remember suddenly we were told on the 13th of or rather it was 12th December, that we proceed towards Khulna. Aim is to capture it as quickly as possible. Because you see, at the United Nations, we've outnumbered, I think, 105 against means for ceasefire. I mean, not technically against us, because you have a ceasefire. 105 against India that way, and only 5 or 6 for India. If my memory serves me right, and I may be wrong, there was a Muslim country which supported us, Iraq, Saddam Hussein. I'm not 100% sure, but that was the impression we were given then, that being a Muslim country, he supported India, did not abstain. A lot of people diplomatically abstained, but he supported us. So despite whatever he was, I think if he did that, he was another true friend of India besides the Russians. So there we trudged along. And I remember early morning and at night also, we were walking towards the Khulna axis. Slowly, because we didn't know where we were to stop or when we would be told to, but we were told that you'll be attacking very soon because there's not much time left. International pressure is building. We have to go and get this thing sorted out. So I remember on the outskirts of Khulna, there is a place called Seramani. And that was a small town, but the Pakistanis were there in force. So then suddenly when we reached there, firing started from their side. So we knew, okay, this was about 5-6 kilometers from Khulna. So we stopped there, and I remember 13th morning, 6 or 7 o'clock, the commanding officer huddled all of us into this half incomplete cinema hall. It was strange. I'll show you some pictures of that a little later. It was half complete, and where the screen should be, there was no screen. There was actual battlefield. You know, in front there was a jungle, and our Delta company was sending troops to probe what is the strength of the enemy. And they were very smart. They wouldn't fire machine guns or medium machine guns or LMGs, because then we would know the strength of the enemy. So they were firing air bursts. Air burst is very lethal because it goes into the air, and around the height of this room, it will burst into hundreds or thousands of fragments and then hit you anywhere. So the casualty figures are very high. So our troops were going and they were firing air bursts. So that delayed our advance. And the brigade had told us कि नहीं ज़्यादा नहीं है, वहाँ पे एक company है, which was wrong information, because later we learned it was a 7-8 companies there with huge manpower. So while all this was going on, the commanding officer was told that you have to attack today and get Khulna by tomorrow morning at any cost. And you've just got a company there. So Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, we were all given our tasks, and my company, my commanding officer was Major Roshan. I was 2 IC. I was just commissioned in June, so hardly 5 months service. So we were all planning, and Alpha and Charlie were to go first. So while I requested my company commander, sir, we should have some idea what we are up against. Let's make one more shot. Now the thing was, there was a jungle in front. On the left was a river, Bhairav River. So we could normally attack from the flanks, you know, left or right, or even rear in exceptional cases. Left was the river when we were sitting ducks. Right was a marshy land. If we went there again, we would be shot. So we were told there's no other way. We have to go for a frontal attack. Frontal attack is very lethal, you know, because the enemies are trenches. You are outside. Every chance of, you know, they're getting you. It's done very, very rarely. But since time was of essence, we were told to go into the attack. So I remember going onto the railway track. We were crawling with our Major Roshan, my company commander, and I could see some, you know, Pakistani pickets and some Pakistanis also in the through the binoculars. And about half an hour later, we were to launch the attack. Okay, we'll see. Suddenly at that time, something hit me. It hit me right here on the chest, just near the heart somewhere. And it looked like, you know, if those of you who've done boxing, like somebody gives you a hard punch and you feel very faint, because later I learned it was a through and through the hole the bullet created. So whatever blood drained out. So at that time, you almost fainted. But I remember I wasn't 100% unconscious. I still could visualize something is happening. I was trying to fight mentally the unconsciousness. And I think whatever drained out, the blood, it drained out, and then slowly I was lying down, my chaps were trying to pick me up. I said, don't do that, you are sitting ducks there. So they crawled back, and gradually, I think after an hour or so, even I felt better. So slowly I crawled a little, and then I was walking, and then my medical team behind the battalion, they put me on a sling. And I think within an hour and a half, I was walking. So I knew I'm not in any danger of life. And later, our Bravo company, Charlie company, I'll show you a photograph. There's a 23-year-old officer, Major Manan. He met me while I was coming back, and he saw me drenched in blood. So face became ashen. He says, BK, what happened? I said, sir, nothing to worry about. I'm okay now. And he says, you're taking it very well. I said, sir, you going into the attack, best of luck. As luck would have it, I learned later, within 1 hour, he was dead. You see, a bullet entered his head right here. I'll show you a photograph taken by the famous photographer Raghu Rai, who happened to be fooling around taking pictures at that time. I think he was 25, 26. Nobody had heard of him. At that time, he was with the Statesman. Now he's very famous. So those pictures are priceless. Somehow I managed to get it from his archives just 2 weeks ago for our regimental get-together. So Major Manan was dead. Another gallant officer, Captain Joginder Singh, who was passing by, asked the Jamans, whose body are you carrying? So they said, sir, saab kuch goli lag gaya kahin. He saw it was a head injury. He knew he was dead. Now look at the gallantry of this officer. He was commanding, Joginder Singh was commanding Bravo company. He, without asking the commanding officer or anybody, with bullets flying, bombs falling, he automatically took over command of this Charlie company on seeing the commander's death and led the attack. Now, this sort of valor you rarely see in armed forces anywhere in the world. He just took over and said, chalo, I'll take over. And later he informed the commanding officer, I've taken over, I'm leading the attack. So he went, to cut a long story short, the bitter fighting. Anybody at a place like this, anybody can be dead in seconds. Or you can go through and you can come out unscathed also. It's just your good luck or your whatever luck you call it. So he captured 10 odd pickets of the Pakistanis who ran away then. And on the eastern side, Delta Company was again involved in the creating an FUP. I must pay tribute to my commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel V.K. Singh, who was a prisoner of war in the Chinese war also. In 1962, for 9 months, he was with the Chinese. And then in this battle, he was leading from the front. He got a shrapnel, slight shrapnel. It's interesting to know he was in a trench with another officer. A bomb fell on his radio set. Radio commander always has a radio set, giving instructions to the company commanders, do this, do that, whatever. In battle, that radio set was crushed and shrapnels then entered his head and he was unconscious for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, he revived. The brigade commander told him, you get yourself evacuated, hand over command to your second in command. He refused. He said, sir, I'm not going to leave my troops. I'm okay. I will fight on. He disobeyed the brigade commander's orders, continued, and that was a great morale booster for our men because, commanding officer leaving the battlefield or dying in battlefield is very bad for troops, in the battlefield. So General Saab survived, and that radio set damage is still kept in our officers' mess as a memento because it saved his life and the life of one Major Umbarje, who was again 10 yards away. If the radio set had not been there, they both maybe they would have gone that day itself, which would have been a terrible tragedy. So God plays different games at different times. This was one of them. So ultimately, when we reached some beachhead on the Pakistani side, we realized their far part that we were told there's one company, there were 7 companies. Fortunately, our divisional commander, Major General Dalveer Singh, he came to a vantage point. He realized, look, our intelligence was not up to the mark. It's not 1, it's 7. So forget brigade, it will be a whole division which will attack. Division is a huge amount of men and firepower. And then we just lay quiet. And by that time, General Sam Manekshaw, who was chief of the Indian Army, had already started throwing leaflets all over Dhaka that you chaps surrender. Otherwise, we will have to take action. And the Pakistani army was in total turmoil. The head of the Pakistani army that time General Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi. He was their head. And there was something called a military governor. I don't know what he was doing, called Major General Rao Farman Ali. Now, how this is something which does not come in books on Bangladesh, but being there, what we know is that all these hectic negotiations were going internationally in UN, etc., that somehow stopped the war, then, it'll become like another Vietnam. You stuck here, you stuck there, and that's it. It'll go on like a festering wound for God knows how many years. United Nations heated debates, Russia always coming to our rescue. The 7th Fleet of the United States came near Bangladesh or East Pakistan to threaten us. The Russians also sent their navy. So then the USS Enterprise, I remember, aircraft carrier, the biggest in the world then, with other supporting ships, had landed. But then the Russians also sent their naval ships, and then the Americans backed off. So the Prime Minister then and the government given instructions to the military that at any cost, get Dhaka first, fast, So the army then used all these tactics. General Manekshaw's leaflets came that if you surrender, we will treat you well. The Pakistani president, I think, had lost control over East Pakistan, or he told them, go ahead, die, but make sure you don't hand over anything to India. Our Indian Air Force did not have operational maps, but from tourist maps, they located the house of the military governor of East Pakistan, that was Major General Rao Farman Ali. And I'm told through these tourist maps, see how skillful our pilots were, they bombed that place. Rao Farman Ali ran into the basement and he said, forget my president. He rang up the United Nations directly that I want to surrender. That led a trail of things. And later, as it happened, Major General Jacob, who was Chief of Staff, Eastern Command, he went to meet General Niazi, just him and his ADC. And there were 3,000 Pakistani troops there. Look at his gallantry. They could have just physically assaulted him. He said, look, I've come under orders of General Manekshaw. If you want to surrender, surrender. Otherwise, then we'll have to fight a battle. And you are outnumbered, we'll finish you off. It was more a game of psychology than anything else. Who's going to crack first? Because for us, every day counted, because the pressure was coming from all over the world. And even our Prime Minister would have, at some time have to sort of relent. So this worked. For that, hats off to General Jacob. He's recently expired. He was a Jew, a very loyal Indian. He later became governor of Punjab also, and totally no-nonsense man. So that worked, and Niazi was in two minds what to do. Naturally, anybody would be. Surrender is a big thing. And this was, I think, the second highest surrender of 93,000 troops and allied workers after the Stalingrad surrender, where the Russians and the Nazis under Hitler, that was Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, when the Russians surrendered due to climatic forces like snow, etc., they couldn't carry on. So this was 93,000. I don't know which one was more, but this was certainly the highest or the second highest surrender in world history. So after that surrender, then of course, Mujibur Rahman came, etc. He came back, he was installed. Coming to our personal side, after I was wounded, I was taken to the Jasor hospital, Pakistani hospital. So I was a little worried कि भाई Pakistani hospital में जा रहे हैं. Then I found a young captain of the Army Medical Corps of ours. He said, sir, we've taken over this hospital. And then he says, nothing to worry. And every day a special train was going from Jasor to Calcutta, full of wounded people. So I was put on that, reached Calcutta. They operated on me immediately. There was no threat to life. So a couple of nerves had been shattered. So the left arm was paralyzed for quite some time, for which I landed in Command Hospital, Pune. And as some of the asides of the war, I'll tell you, we used to get a lot of VIPs to come, which is very natural to, sort of pep up our morale. So one day, General Arora's wife, Mrs. Arora, the army commander's wife, came to pay us a visit. So she said, what do you all want? And mainly they were young officers, So a lot of Punjabis are in the armed forces, naturally. So they said, Madam, makke ki roti or sarson ka saag, we'd love it. We've not had it for a long time. So I thought, यार वो तो मक्के की रोटी तो खा ही लेंगे, कुछ और मांगते हैं. After all, it's the army commander's wife. She can get anything done. So I said, ma'am, could we have the surrender ceremony photograph with the autograph of General Arora and General Niazi? I thought that would be something unique. She said, okay, we'll take a shot at it. So after 3 days, huge tiffins came from General's house, personally cooked by Mrs. Arora, lots of, nice makke ki roti and saag, which we all had. And the ADC came and he said, he had brought those photographs also. He said, these photographs we've got, and I've got a copy of that. It's one of my most prized possessions. It was signed Jagjit Singh because General Arora's name was Jagjit Singh Arora. That is still there. It's fading now. He said, sir, we could not get General Niazi's signature because last evening he was shifted to Bareilly jail. Because the Pakistani troops were then sent into various camps and we looked after them very well. We gave them same food that our Jawans ate, better accommodation than what we had. We gave them the better of. And I remember my battalion after the war was at Ranchi, and I had gone on sick leave from the hospital, and they were very well looked after. Exactly the same as our Jawans. There was no shortfall and things like that. Recently, I was in one of the southern Indian cities. I can't disclose the location for practical reasons, where we were meeting those veterans of 50 years back with the young people and all the other regimental officers. And I remember 2 of my Jawans who were at my side when the war was taking place. We were in it for a month together. Of course, they had retired also. So I asked them, yaar, aap kya the us samay? To bola, sir, hum to sipahi tha. Both of them later became what is called Subedar Major of the regiment. It was very important after the commanding officer because he directly sort of leads the men. And they not only became Subedar Majors, both of them, but they honorary captains also. So they were outstanding fellows. I was just lucky to have such people at my side at that time who were just sepoys, and gradually they rose up the ranks. I'd like to show you just a few. I have hordes of them. Few important photographs which will give you some idea about the war as it took place. This is a picture just before Jasor of the Jhingar-Gacha bridge. On the extreme left is me as a 19-year-old second lieutenant with 1 star. In the middle is Major Harry Roshan, who was my company commander. And extreme right, the photographs and all were damaged, because I lost all my worldly possessions because I had 1 suitcase with whatever clothes or whatever I had, and that got burnt, stolen. I don't know, in the war, a lot of things happened. So ultimately what I had was my olive green trousers and shirt. They gave me some pajamas. And on extreme right is my friend Major Captain Joginder Singh, who, as I said, voluntarily took over Charlie Company and led the attack. This is just before we reached Jasor. And you can see some bridges behind which were blown up by the Pakistanis to delay our advance. This is again on the same bridge. Extreme left is me, Joginder Singh, Harry Roshan. There was a railway track also, it was blown up with the bridge. But that didn't delay our advance because our Indian engineers were very smart. They quickly built some other pontoon bridge at the side and we were able to cross over. This is a famous picture by Raghu Rai. As I said, that time he was unknown. In this picture, it's very historic. It even features in the famous book, Bangladesh, The Price of Freedom, a pictorial by Raghu Rai, which is an international bestseller. It's available on Amazon. It shows the human tragedy of Bangladesh with such pictures that I couldn't sleep for 2 nights after seeing that book. There were few armed forces photographs. This is, if you see, there are only 3 faces visible. The rest, there's a Jawan at the back. The 3, in the first line, you see one young officer with a cap. Then you see another one with a cap. And you see the third one partially, partially without a cap. Just the hair and nose you can see. So that is me. I should have been court-martialed for not wearing a cap. Then next to me, that is me. Then next is Captain Utpal Sen. And next is, this other one who's pointing out left. This is Captain Manan. Left, bye. Head jo hai na. Yeah, this is Captain Manan. It so happened Captain Manan had met me, as I told you, and so this picture would have been in the cinema hall, and Airbus were taking place in front. We were thinking what to do. So this would have been around 11 o'clock. By 1 o'clock, I was wounded, and by 4 o'clock, Major Manan was dead. And this was captured. It's one of the live actions in the Second World War and Vietnam War. You had some photographers who went into battle. This I told Raghu Rai. I said, this is so rare because you've taken a film somewhere which is normally not available. Direct action you have captured. So this is that and the attack took place around 6 o'clock. Yeah, this is the same cinema hall. As I said, it was incomplete, under construction. These are some of our Jawans at that time. All these pictures are 13 December morning. Attack took place in the afternoon and evening. Next page. This is the picture. You can see autographed by General Jagjit Singh Arora. Jagjit Singh is a little faint at the bottom. So this is that photograph. You can see General Niazi. At the rear in naval uniform is Vice Admiral Krishnan, head of the Indian Navy Eastern Command. Air Force, you have Air Marshal Diwan. He was head of the Eastern Command Air Force. Then is that famous General Sagat Singh, who threw the Chinese out in 1967. He was a big panga taker. So he refused some orders, to when the Chinese were coming to back out, and he threw them out. Very bold officer. And then, of course, is the famous General J.F.R. Jacob, little plumpish. Later, he became army commander there and later governor of Punjab. And General Jagjit Singh Arora and General A.A.K. Niazi. Yeah. Okay, gentlemen. So this was it. It was a short presentation. I tried to make it as interesting as possible.
We salute you for the services that you have rendered to the nation as an army person and as a civil servant. Thank you once again, sir.